She was the one woman I was never supposed to want, older, untouchable, the kind of person you promise yourself to forget. But the more I tried, the more impossible it became. Every glance lingered too long, every silence said too much. Until one night she looked straight into my eyes and whispered, "Prove it." What started as something we both tried to resist turned into the one thing neither of us could walk away from. This is a story about timing, truth, and the kind of love that refuses to fade, no matter how wrong it feels. She looked straight into my eyes and said, "Prove it." The first time she looked at me that way, everything around us seemed to stop, the hum of the ceiling fan, the ticking clock, even my breath. Her gaze was steady, unhurried, like she'd seen this moment coming long before I had. I don't remember what I was saying, something small, something safe, but her eyes told me she'd heard something else. Something I didn't mean to say out loud. She was sitting by the kitchen window, a loose strand of hair catching the afternoon light, her sleeves rolled to her elbows. The faint smell of coffee hung between us. I watched her trace a finger around the rim of her cup, slow, deliberate, as if deciding whether to speak or let silence do the talking for her. "You shouldn't look at me like that," she murmured. "Like what?" "Like you mean it." Her voice was calm, but her hand trembled just slightly before she tucked it under her arm. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do with the air between us. "I wasn't," I said. But even I didn't believe it. She smiled then, faint, knowing. "You're terrible at lying." I looked away, pretending to study the window, the fading garden outside. But my eyes kept drifting back, to the small lines near hers when she smiled, to the gold chain at her throat, to the way she breathed like she'd been holding something in for too long. She stood, crossing the space between us slowly. Her perfume was faint, something floral, quiet. I could feel the warmth of her body before she even touched me. "Tell me," she said softly, "what is it you think you're doing here?" I swallowed. "Helping." She tilted her head close enough that her breath touched my neck. "Helping," she repeated, the word nearly a whisper. "Is that what you call it?" My hands stayed at my sides, though I wanted to reach out, not to pull her closer, but to steady myself. "You should go," she said finally. But her voice didn't sound convinced. "I could," I said. "If you wanted me to." Her eyes lifted to mine again, searching, daring, almost pleading. "Then why haven't you?" The silence that followed was unbearable, the kind that fills every inch of a room and still feels too small to contain what's about to happen. Her fingers brushed my wrist, once softly, like an accident that lasted too long. I didn't move. Neither did she. "Don't pretend you don't want me here," she said, the words trembling just enough to make them real. And before I could stop myself, I said it, quietly, truthfully. "I stopped pretending a long time ago." Her lips parted slightly. I could see the pulse in her neck quicken, the faint rise of her shoulders as she breathed in. It wasn't a confession, not yet. It was something closer, the edge before it. Then, from somewhere down the hall, a door creaked open. A sound that shouldn't have meant anything, but in that moment, it broke the spell. She stepped back, eyes darting toward the noise, her breath catching mid-sentence. And just like that, the air between us turned cold again, but only on the surface. Because when she looked back at me, her eyes said what her mouth didn't. "This isn't over." The next time I saw her, she pretended not to remember what had happened, and I pretended to believe her. She was in the garden, trimming a row of roses that hadn't bloomed in weeks. The air smelled of soil and rain, and I could tell she'd been out there for a while, sleeves pushed up, hair tied carelessly, hands moving with the kind of focus people use when they're trying not to think. I leaned against the fence. "They're not going to grow faster just because you glare at them." She didn't turn around. "And you think standing there watching me helps?" I smiled. "Moral support." She finally looked over her shoulder, one glance, nothing more, but it was enough to pull the air out of me again. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her face looked tired, softer somehow, as if something in her had quietly given up trying to appear composed. I thought you said you were busy this week, she said. I was, I replied. Then I wasn't. The shears clicked once, twice. You shouldn't keep coming here for no reason. Maybe I have one. Her hand stilled. She didn't ask what I meant, maybe because she already knew. She'd been alone for years. That much I'd gathered from half conversations and the silence that followed when I asked about her husband. He's gone, was all she'd said once. Not in the tragic sense, just gone, like a light turned off in another room. Maybe that's why she filled her days with routines, gardening, reading, the same morning walks. Everything neat, predictable, untouched. I, on the other hand, had the kind of restlessness that came from not knowing what I wanted, until her. She noticed it too. The way I'd start to speak and then stop, the way I'd look away too fast whenever she met my eyes. When I handed her the scissors, my fingers brushed hers. A faint static, nothing more, but she froze. Careful, she said too quietly. I wanted to ask why. Why she kept pretending it wasn't there, this thing neither of us could name. But I didn't. Because she looked like someone who might break if I pushed too hard. I shouldn't, she began, then trailed off. Shouldn't what? She exhaled slowly, eyes on the roses. Get used to this. Her voice was soft, almost drowned by the rustle of leaves, but it landed heavy. I nodded, though I didn't understand what this meant. The quiet? The nearness? The part of her that came alive only when we were alone? She stepped closer, as if testing her own restraint. The scent of her shampoo lingered in the air, faint, familiar. Her hand brushed my arm, maybe by accident, maybe not. Neither of us moved away. For a moment, everything stilled again, the same stillness as that day in the kitchen. And even though nothing was said, something between us shifted, quietly, dangerously, like a door that had just been left unlocked. It happened on a Thursday. I was fixing the light in her hallway, a small thing, an excuse more than a task. She stood nearby, pretending to tidy up a shelf that didn't need it. Every time I shifted on the step stool, I could feel her eyes on me, then feel her look away when I glanced down. Careful, she said softly. If you fall, I'm not catching you. Wouldn't be the worst way to end the day, I muttered. She smiled faintly. You think everything's a game. Only when it feels like losing otherwise. Her brow lifted at that, but she didn't reply. When the bulb finally flickered to life, the sudden light caught her face, and I froze. The glow softened her, made her eyes look younger, her lips parted just slightly as she watched me climb down. For a moment, we stood too close. I could feel the warmth of her breath, the subtle scent of jasmine in her hair. She stepped back, but her shoulder brushed mine first. Neither of us said anything. The sound broke us, a phone buzzing somewhere in the living room. She turned too fast, knocking over the vase beside her. It hit the floor, shattering loud enough to jolt us both. I crouched instantly. It's okay, I've got it. She knelt too, fingers trembling as she reached for a piece of glass. Don't, I said. You'll cut yourself. Too late. A drop of blood welled on her fingertip. Without thinking, I took her hand. Her skin was warm, softer than I'd imagined. I held it too long, thumb brushing the inside of her wrist before I caught myself. She didn't pull away. Not right away. Then her phone buzzed again. We both looked up at it lying on the table, a name flashing on the screen, Clara. I knew the name. Her neighbor, the one who liked to stop by unannounced. She moved first, jerking her hand back. I should get that. Right, I said, stepping away, though my pulse was still racing. The call ended before she reached it. A long silence followed. When she turned back, her expression was unreadable, a mix of guilt, fear, something else she couldn't quite hide. We can't, she began. I know, I said. I know. But I didn't move toward the door. And she didn't ask me to. She hadn't called in 3 days. I told myself I wouldn't think about it, but every hour made that harder. The silence gnawed at me, not angry silence, but the kind that feels like someone rehearsing distance. When I finally saw her again, it was by accident. Or maybe she'd planned it that way, walking down the same narrow street where I sometimes went to clear my head. She stopped when she saw me. "You shouldn't look so surprised," she said quietly. "I wasn't," I lied. Her coat was buttoned wrong, like she'd been in a hurry. The wind caught her hair, brushing strands across her face. I wanted to reach out, just to fix it, but I didn't trust what would happen after that. We walked in silence for a while. The air smelled like rain, like the edge of something about to break. "I've been trying to stay away," she said at last. "It's harder than I thought. That makes two of us." She gave a faint laugh, but it sounded tired. "You're too young to know what it means to regret something before it even happens." "I'm not sure that's true." Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp, searching. "You think you understand me?" "I don't," I admitted. "But I can't seem to stop trying." We reached the old bridge, the one that overlooked the river. The light was fading, the world turning the color of wet concrete. She leaned against the railing, hands tucked into her sleeves. "Sometimes I forget what it's like to be wanted," she said softly. The honesty in her voice hit harder than anything she'd ever said to me. I stepped closer, not touching her yet. "Then let me remind you." She turned her head slightly, just enough for me to see the shimmer in her eyes before she blinked it away. "You don't know what you're asking for." "I know exactly what I'm asking for." The wind pushed a loose strand of hair across her cheek. Without thinking, I reached out and brushed it back. My fingers grazed her skin, a fleeting, trembling contact. She didn't move. Her breath caught. "You shouldn't," she whispered. "But you're not stopping me." Her hands gripped the railing tighter. The sound of the river filled the silence between us, loud and endless. "I can't do this," she said, but the words broke halfway through. "Then tell me to leave." She turned, eyes bright, jaw tight. "You think it's that easy?" "No," I said. "That's why I'm still here." Her breath trembled, her lips parting slightly as if to speak, or to close the distance. For a heartbeat, there was nothing else, just the nearness, the warmth of her, the pulse in my throat matching hers. Then, the sharp click of heels on pavement behind us. She froze. Someone was coming. She didn't look away from me when she whispered, barely audible. "This has to stop, before it doesn't." It happened in the quiet, the kind of silence that hides things until they're forced into light. She'd asked me to stop by in the evening. Her voice on the phone had been careful, steady, like she was trying to sound normal. I almost believed it. When I arrived, she was already waiting by the window. The room was dim, the lamp behind her casting a soft, gold glow over everything, the kind of light that makes truth look merciful. "I thought you weren't coming," she said without turning around. "I wasn't," I replied. "Then I did." Her reflection in the glass looked different, smaller somehow. "There's something you should know." I took a step closer, cautious. "What is it?" She hesitated. "Clara came by yesterday." That name again. The one flashing on her phone the night the vase shattered. "She said she saw us," she continued, her voice thin. "In the garden. The way we were standing." My stomach tightened. "And what did she say exactly?" "She didn't have to say much." Her hands fidgeted with the edge of her sleeve. "She asked if it was true." "What did you tell her?" "I told her no." The word landed sharp, cutting through the air between us. She turned then, meeting my eyes for the first time. I lied. I didn't move. I couldn't. The way she said it, quiet, almost guilty, made it feel like a confession and a goodbye in the same breath. "Why?" I asked finally. "Because I didn't want to see it reflected in someone else's face," she said. "What this looks like. What it means." Her voice trembled, and so did her hands. I reached for her, but she stepped back, not far, just enough that I could feel the loss of space. "I can't keep pretending this isn't real," she whispered. "Then don't." She shook her head. "You don't understand. You still have time to walk away." "I don't. I'm not leaving." The words came out faster than I meant them to. She stared at me like she wanted to believe it, but couldn't let herself. Her breath itched, her eyes glistening in the low light. You think this is some story you can control. But if anyone finds out, I don't care. I cut in. Her eyes flashed, fear, anger, something deeper. She took a step forward, close enough that her scent filled the air between us. You should care, she said. Because I already do. The confession slipped out before she could catch it. Her shoulders stiffened as if she could take it back. I exhaled unsteady. Say that again. Her lips parted, trembling. Don't make me. I moved closer, slow, deliberate, close enough that the warmth of her body pressed against mine. This doesn't end well, she said, breathless. Then let it end badly, I murmured. For a long, suspended second, either of us moved. Then she turned away sharply, brushing past me, her shoulder grazing my chest, her hand trembling as she gripped the doorknob. When she spoke again, her voice was low, resigned. You'd better go, before I stop asking you to. And just like that, the truth had changed everything, and still, it wasn't enough to make either of us stop. Days passed without a word between us. I tried to fill the silence with noise, errands, friends, meaningless chatter, but none of it stuck. Everything sounded hollow. Her absence was louder than her voice had ever been. When I finally went back, it wasn't because I had something to say. It was because I couldn't not. She opened the door halfway, surprise flickering across her face before she caught it. You shouldn't be here. I know. She hesitated, then stepped aside. Then why are you? The house smelled faintly of rain and lavender, a mix that felt too familiar. The air between us was tight, heavy. I noticed her hands, bare, no rings, the faint tremor still there. I needed to see you, I said quietly. That's not a reason. It's the only one I have left. She turned away, her voice thin. You think this gets easier if you just show up? No, I said. But pretending it doesn't exist hasn't worked either. Her shoulders stiffened. You don't know what you're asking me to give up. Then tell me. She faced me slowly. Her eyes were tired, rimmed with something between anger and longing. Peace, she said. Privacy. Dignity. I'm not trying to take those from you. You already have. The words cut, but I didn't move. I took a step closer, then another, until there was barely a breath between us. I could see the faint rise of her chest, the tremor in her lips, the pulse at her neck. Then let me give you something back, I whispered. Her jaw tightened. You think this fixes anything? No. But maybe it stops the pretending. She exhaled, shaky, eyes flicking to my mouth, then away again. You don't know how long I've tried to stop wanting this. Her voice broke on the last word. That was all it took, the crack that let everything spill out. I reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. My hand lingered against her cheek longer than it should have. She didn't move away. This isn't fair, she murmured. I know. Her breath trembled. You'll regret it. Maybe, I said. But not tonight. The space between us collapsed, not with a rush, but with a slow inevitability. She leaned in, almost imperceptibly, until her forehead rested against mine. We stayed like that, suspended in something neither of us could undo. Every sound in the room seemed to fade, the rain against the glass, the hum of the lamp, the noise of everything that wasn't her. Her hand found mine, fingers trembling, then stilling as they closed around me. I don't want to lose myself, she whispered. Then don't, I said. Just let go. Her lips hovered a breath away, and then finally, after all the hesitation, all the silences, she didn't turn away. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't safe. It was real. And in that fragile closeness, we stopped pretending who we were supposed to be, and finally became who we already were. It had been weeks since that night, weeks since everything changed and nothing could be undone. I told myself distance would help, that maybe space could turn what happened into something easier to carry. It didn't. When I finally saw her again, it wasn't planned. She was sitting on the same bench near the river where we first stood together. The same wind, the same faint smell of jasmine. Time hadn't softened her, it had only made her quieter. I approached slowly. "You still come here?" She smiled barely. "Some habits are hard to break." I sat beside her, careful not to sit too close. "Not yet." The silence stretched, gentle this time, not heavy. "I thought you were gone for good," she said. "I tried to be." Her eyes turned toward me. "And?" "I failed." She exhaled a breath that sounded like relief and sorrow mixed. "You always do." We both laughed then, quietly, like two people remembering something private. "I kept thinking about what you said," I told her. "About losing yourself. And I think we both did. But maybe that's how we found whatever this is." She didn't answer, but her hand shifted slightly on the bench, close enough that I could see the faint tremor in her fingers. I turned mine upward, letting the space between us choose. She hesitated, then let her hand fall into mine. Her skin was cool, soft, real. No words, no conditions, just the quiet understanding that we were done pretending. "I used to think age meant control," she said softly. "But you made me feel things I thought I'd outgrown." I smiled. "Maybe that's what love does. It ignores reason." The wind lifted her hair, brushing it across her face. I reached out instinctively, tucking it behind her ear. She didn't move away. Her eyes softened. "You still make it hard to breathe." "Good," I said quietly. "Means it's real." For a while we just sat there, her shoulder against mine, her head resting lightly where it always belonged. No promises, no grand declarations. Just warmth, quiet, and something that finally felt like peace. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "You think this lasts?" I looked at her, at the way the light caught her face, at the faint smile she tried to hide. "It already has." She smiled fully this time, a slow, genuine curve that reached her eyes. I leaned forward, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead, simple, certain. And for the first time since it all began, neither of us pulled away.